Hello, my name is Mark Greene, Mission Champion at the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity. And this is the TJM Thank God It's Monday podcast, where we explore the wonderful ways in which Jesus works through his people in a whole variety of jobs and sectors. In this episode, winsome wisdom for the way comes from two people who work in the search business. Joëlle Warren, the founder of Warren Partners and MBE, and Josh Greene, 2 years into working for probably one of the biggest search agencies in the world. As you might expect, the recruitment business, like many other sales-oriented businesses, has a somewhat tarnished reputation. So in this episode, amongst many other rich things, we'll be exploring the tension between truth-telling and commercial imperatives. Well, welcome to you both. As ever, in the TJM podcast, you get to ask the questions too, but I get to start. So Josh, let's start with you. Tell us, 2 years in, still smiling. Tell us about your job and what drew you into this business.
Yeah, so I am part of the research division of, as you said, one of the largest executive search firms, so offices globally. I joined the firm 7 months ago, started my career 2 years ago, started my career in what's called contingent recruitment. Essentially, you recruit people, but only get paid once you fill the role. Yeah. So it's success or pretty much nothing. The search world is slightly different. Started university studying economics. Felt a bit sorry for myself during university. I didn't get my first choice, had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Did a placement year as a risk analyst, essentially an Excel monkey for a year. Realised that wasn't what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a big finance person. That wasn't the case. Met or had a friend that was working for this recruitment firm, knew I wanted to build different skills that weren't Excel, probably client-facing, relationship management, didn't know exactly what that meant, but joined this business doing junior recruitment for private equity and moved 7 months ago.
And do you see God's hand in? I mean, this is a really blue-chip company that you're working for, isn't it?
It is. Brilliant company, really, really pleased that I was able to join and enormously see God's hand, his grace in it, even just kind of equipping me with skills. I grew up the son of two church leaders, so all throughout my childhood they were kind of not the biggest earners, or they didn't, they've not got great industry knowledge. In many ways they weren't able to kind of help me when it came to my career, but actually it equipped me with brilliant skills to speak to people, present, and God really kindly has used it. And now I'm in a job I really enjoy, in an industry that I want to keep running at for as long as kind of God's got it for me.
And what do you like about it?
I like that pretty much every day you're making decisions that are influencing the bottom line of your team. So almost everything you do is contributing to how much money your team's making. I really like that. It feels like there's meaning in your work.
As opposed to only really contributing when you make a placement.
Making a placement, also contrasting it to my placement year when I was in a middle office function really, and kind of anyone can do the job, they just need someone to do it. Yeah. It feels a little bit different, it feels more entrepreneurial. There's also a lot of what I appreciate in kind of the broader, thinking about my career more broadly, is there's a lot of challenge, or kind of spiritual challenge in it, because recruitment's a really hard place to be. There's a lot of disappointments, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and each day is, God, where are you in this? Opportunity each day to submit the day to him, trust him. Each day there's probably going to be something disappointing. Each day there's going to be a small win. Yeah. How do you deal with that? There's a lot of opportunity for God to grow in you, and you to kind of keep growing your own faith within it. There's a lot of challenge.
Well, we'll definitely come back to some of that. Thank you. Joel, give us a snapshot of your career. Joëlle, sorry.
Merci.
It's
all right, we're in London. We can say Joëlle. Well, I read economics too, and then went into the city as a corporate banker with Lloyd's on their graduate scheme, and did that for 10 years, and until I had started a family. And corporate banking and a family were not very conducive to going well together in those days. And we'd also moved up to Cheshire, which is where I now live, and there weren't very many corporate bankers based up there then.
Right.
It has changed now. So I was at home being an earth mother for 5 years and loved it. And then my dad, who had run a headhunting firm, had retired, and his partners said, would I come and cover the maternity leave of a finance director? Big mistake. Putting a banker in charge of a set of accounts, but I managed to muddle through year end. Fortunately, it was to cover a maternity leave, and she came back. And they said, well, what do you think of us? And I really liked the environment. I liked the sort of small company. And a lot of what Josh has said, I like the fact that you were making a difference to clients and to candidates. So they said, how about setting up a banking practice? Because that's what you did. So I did. And I did it for a couple of years, working part-time alongside being a mum. And at the end of it, they said, well, what about being a partner? And I thought, no, actually, I don't want to be a partner here. And so I just thought, I was in my early 30s, I just thought, oh, well, I think I'll go off and set up a headhunting firm. So I did. I mean, the naivety of it all, but I did, and it's grown, and we're a boutique firm, and it was all set up because around my values, people often say, what are your values? And I have this, the core value of Warren Partners right from the beginning, and it's still true now. If you asked anybody in the firm, and we've got people of all faiths and people of none, it's that verse from Matthew chapter 7, treat others as you want to be treated. And that's been running right through it.
Brilliant. Why did you feel the need to set up a firm with that particular value? Was there something about the industry that you were observing? I mean,
Yeah.
what was going on in the industry at the time that made you think?
So, Josh knows it's not a sector that's always trumpeted for moral values, particularly probably where you started in that contingent recruitment space. And you're sort of in a bit of a war for, getting fees on the doors. You're not always worried about how you treat candidates. There can be quite a lot of sharp elbows with colleagues. And I just sort of thought, actually, it really matters to me how people are treated. It matters to me that the person on reception is treated the same as the chair of the board. It matters to me that we treat our suppliers the same as we treat our clients. And I'd seen some examples where that wasn't the case. And I just sort of thought, no, I'm going to prove that you can. Rob Parsons wrote this book called Succeed in Business Without Losing in Life.
Yeah.
And I just love that phrase. And
So coming just as a question to you, obviously, 2 years in, but you've been in a number of different places. That description of the industry as it was then, what's it like now in terms of overall?
Very, very similar, and frankly, it's not going to change quickly. And I was thinking about this. What are the challenges? What makes it like that? And I think probably it's because of the short-term nature of the industry, and almost what you win this week and how well this week goes often affects how you get paid next month. And so if you waste time, and I've got a question for you in a moment, kind of if you're wasting time this week treating candidates really well, and that's obviously not a waste of time, but you only get paid for kind of what you do, all the nice stuff. You don't get paid for that. Maybe long term there's incentives, but right now I want to close this search, and I want to kind of spend as much time reaching out to new candidates and doing everything I can to close this search so that I get paid next month. So question to you, when you started, was that something you were willing to do, i.e. I'm happy to make less money but run what I feel is a kind of more morally sound business, if that's not the right way of. Did you think about it like that?
Yeah, I suppose I did actually, Josh. And that was, I remember a partner in the previous firm just saying, well, now you're a headhunter, you'll never have to, you'll never be short of money. And I kind of thought, actually, that's not what matters to me. The way I've been paid in Warren Partners is, as originally an owner of a business, and we're now an employee-owned trust, all I've cared about is the long-term future of the business. And so actually investing in people now, they would be clients and they are, 30 years on, they are clients in the business, and people who were, maybe human resources managers back then, and they were sort of involved in the process. They could be CEOs now, or even chairs, and so it has been more taking that long-term view. But then I was in a different position to you, because I came in as a partner from being a banker. I didn't sort of work my way up through the industry and then set up the firm. So I think it's easier if you are setting up the firm with Christian values than being in a firm that doesn't necessarily have that.
Could you give me, an example, if you like, of a situation or some situations where you're treating people differently than perhaps they might otherwise be treated?
Yeah.
Or a candidate or a client or a supplier?
Yeah. So, I usually go through all of them. So candidates, we're not great at giving feedback and being really honest with candidates as an industry. And I just think you have to be. I don't think it's fair to tell people that, oh yeah, you're the best candidate for this job and it's perfect for you. If they're not going to be happy there long term, that's not great for the business, actually. You won't have a happy client long term. You won't have a happy candidate long term. So I don't think it's great. And then clients, I think we do make promises to clients without really all the facts and what have you behind them. We're not great at sticking to deadlines. There's an industry practice which I hate, which is on top of fees, and we charge whopping fees. On top of them, the industry charges a percentage for administration costs. What's that about? I mean, doesn't this massive fee cover your administration costs? So we don't do that. Suppliers, I think very often, suppliers, they can make mistakes, can't they? And we have these things, treat others as you want to be treated. So if we make a mistake, then we want to be given the opportunity to put it right and we call it recover with style. So we do the same with our suppliers. We say, right, try and put it right and recover with style. Colleagues, the same sort of thing applies.
And when you say suppliers, you mean people who supply staff to your business? Okay.
Or stuff. So when we first started, the two types of suppliers we've used. We used to use outsourced research.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example about that, which isn't treating others as we want to be treated, because that was to do with lying, and it'd be interesting to talk about lying because I have a thing about it. But another sort of supplier we use is advertising agencies. So when in the days, you don't remember this, Josh, but you used to. It was so much easier when you put an advert in the Sunday Times and you got lots of people responding. We don't do any of that now. But they'd made a complete mess up of this advert, and it would have been easy to say, right, cutting all relationships with this agency, but actually we just said to them, look, have you got any suggestions as to how you could recover with style? And they did. They came up with something, and actually that was better for our firm because longer term, they know that you treat them well. We got bumped to the front of all sorts of queues because, and we always pay. That's the other thing. We always pay our bills on time. People might say 30 days. It's 30 days, and then you pay on 45. Well, that's not how we want to be treated. So we pay our bills on 14 days, 30 days, whatever it is.
Tell us a little bit about this trust business and the notion of little things mattering.
I think it goes way back to when I was in banking. And I remember I was due to be doing Sunday school on the Sunday, and it was Friday, and I'd done my prep and I knew I needed paper clips. And so I went in. I said, I'm going to have to dash out to get some paper clips. And they said, oh, there are bags of paper clips in the stationery cupboard. Just grab a box. And I said, oh, well, how much do they cost? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. And I said, oh, yeah, it's really important to me that I have to pay for them. And I used to do the same. If I wanted a stamp, I'd have to pay for the stamp, not put it through the franking machine. And it's that thing about, those that are trusted in small things can be trusted in big things. And it's building that almost a muscle up of, being able to be trusted. And that was the story I was going to tell about the outsourced researcher. We had one that we used to use, and we found out that they were lying. And we just sort of thought, actually, we can't trust them, if they're lying, and so we had to stop the relationship with them.
Has it happened inside the firm?
Trusting, yeah. So it has somebody who was messing with expenses, and they've gone. So it doesn't mean being soft, being a Christian at work. It means, treating people in, to a certain set of standards. And yeah.
Can I ask a quick? Can I pull back to one of the things you said about kind of the biblical teaching of be trusted with small things, and God will give you larger things. Have you seen that throughout your career? Would you say, are there moments, or even the broad brushes that you say, actually I see God as entrusting me with more here, or?
I remember sort of way back when we did live in London, and we were busy praying the prayer of Jabez, Lord, enlarge my territory. And Andrew was a primary school teacher, and I was a sort of graduate trainee in the bank. And we were praying this prayer, and, God has, and he's enlarged our sphere of influence. And I suppose we've just tried to honour him at each of those steps along the way. And we tend to, both of us tend to say yes to things. And now he's influencing at the top of government, and I'm in boardrooms. And, there aren't many Christians there. And I'm sure that's where God wants us to be.
It's an interesting thing about that verse in Matthew 7, verse 7:12, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Because it is, in a sense, there's a little word before that, which is so. So actually that passage is a summary, in a sense, of this whole Sermon on the Mount, 5 through 7. So on the basis of all of these things, now do unto others. It's also rooted in the Father love of God, because the verses just before that are about, if you ask your heavenly Father for a fish, well, are you going to get, or you give them a stone? If you ask them for bread and a stone, and fish and a snake. And so there's something there, I think, about the imitation of the trust in God's fatherly provision for you that roots that. It's not only it's a good moral thing to do that maybe other people from other religions would say, but it's actually rooted in the trust in God that you've already seen. He's your Father. He's got good things for you. He's worthy. Out of that, we imitate him and trust him that he's got good things for us too.
Yeah.
His generosity underpins it, rather than a kind of pragmatism, in a sense, because it can be pragmatic, can't it? We're going to come back to lying, I think, because I don't think you'll let me escape it. For you, some of the challenges for you, as in your first 2 years, what are the challenges that you're facing in your work? Where does the rubber hit the road for you?
Yeah, and I'd like that you spoke about the point of trusting God, because it's, as an ambitious young person, I can almost think, God, why have you not blessed every search I've worked on? Why am I not filling roles left, right, and centre? Completely trust if God wanted to, he could, direct my mouse clicks, and I could be meshing the right people, and they'd be interested in all the roles. And it didn't feel like that in my kind of the first 18 months doing contingent recruitment, where you're on and off the phone all the time, and it's very high pace work. Thinking, God, I've been working on this for 6 months. Why haven't I found the right person? And so trusting that God will I mean, first of all, that's not normal. No one does kind of fills every role that they work on anyway. But trusting his provision over my career has been one of the biggest challenges. And this move that I made 7 months ago to the business I'm at the moment has been brilliant. And I think, God, what so kind of you providing that for me. But it's trusting his day-to-day provision. That's really tricky when things aren't going as you would like them to be, or you're thinking, God, where are you? But trying to submit that to him, and ultimately it's checking myself. Probably I've care about this a little bit too much if it's plaguing my thoughts all the time and on all the weekends and things. But just having a healthy pursuit of God while trying to honour my employers and trust he will give me the right wins that I need. And if I miss a promotion, God, I can still trust you if my future lies in another firm, if it lies here. Kind of not knee-jerk reacting to things, but trusting God's steady guidance. I think that's probably the biggest challenge in recruitment, because you get rejected often. You'll be on the phone to people and they'll hang up without saying anything, or often be quite rude. So I think, resilience and trusting God with your career, because it's in many ways, I don't know if hand to mouth's the right word to use, but you know if you're doing well, you know if you're doing badly.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you've talked about the external, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was going to say it is very quantifiable, isn't
Yes.
it? I was thinking about two situations as a business we've been through. The first was the economic crisis of sort of 2008. And oh my goodness, I can remember walking around fields with my dog in the dark in the morning to walk her, and singing that Lou Fellingham song. I'm hard pressed on every side, but I'm not crushed. I feel pulled to pieces, but in truth, I know I'm not, because he's with you. And sometimes, I mean, the psalmist did that, didn't he? He raged at God, why are you doing this to me? And I do that a lot. And then it's the same with COVID, because, all of a sudden no, you wouldn't. But I remember when the phone stopped in that March, April, and there was no new work for 3 months, and I've still got all of these wages to pay, and so it's not the same. But it is, filling a job. But my goodness, and scary stuff.
Leading a business, did you feel God speak to you during that period of letting people go and what the government scheme was?
The furloughing,
yeah.
I mean, very, very definitely, I felt God's presence with me. I think sometimes we think God speaks to us. I don't know. I'm not sure he's always speaking in big voices, but if you're sort of reading the Bible and you're talking to Christians, and a lot of Christian music and stuff has got biblical. I think he speaks to me in those kind of ways. But it comes back to sort of being true to what it is. So in all of those situations, with my non-Christian colleagues, I'd be saying, so how do we treat people here? What do we do with our suppliers? What do we do with our colleagues? And that sort of thing. So I suppose it's just doing the same stuff in the same way, and trusting him.
Can I ask you, I want to dive more into your challenges a little bit. I mean, you've talked about the external thing, and also, the rejection and so on and so forth. How about the sort of internal dynamics of where you are? I mean, usually at this stage of people's careers, there's quite a lot of competition going on, and how do you manage that, and the internal dynamics?
Yeah, it's tricky at a recruitment firm, I think, because you're what do they call it? Your internal. You got to kind of market yourself internally.
Your brand.
Your brand, that's right. Yeah, your internal brand's
important. Give your brand.
Yeah, your internal brand's really important, and often that's what kind of sentiment around different employees, even if it's not grounded in an awful lot, can dictate whether or not you get promoted. That's not always the case. Most companies will have a kind of formal promotion process, etc., where there are tangibles that you've got to hit. But it really influences the time and your experience at a firm if people think you're great because you tell everyone about what you do, and if they think you're rubbish because you're quite quiet and you don't tell anyone about the searches you've solved and who you've just spoken to and who you're working with. So as culturally being a British person, you're quite slow to do that generally. I mean, there are people out there that are great at that. I wasn't.
They go
one
on
of
The
those.
Apprentice usually.
Well, exactly, yeah, and think they're brilliant.
Yeah.
But also, growing up as a Christian, you're told that all your hard work, lots of it should be unseen. Yeah, exactly. You do it for God, and you do it in the quiet.
Yeah.
So that doesn't come naturally to promote yourself. And I'm working on this, and I did this, and I think I should get promoted because. So lots of that's kind of tricky to work through. I think my conclusion is you've got to lean into it a little bit more, try and be less British, and I mean, certainly don't lie about what you're doing. That was another challenge. Often people will palm things off as their kind of original ideas in meetings, and I remember a few months in, I suggested something to a colleague that I started off at a similar time. He then said the same thing in a meeting, and everyone went, "Oh yeah, brilliant idea," and he palmed it off at his own. And I thought, that was my idea.
So you got up and punched him on the nose.
Yeah, punched on the nose, and that's why I left.
I think you're right, Josh. There is some leaning into that. And, if we're going to, as Christians, we're going to be want to be in those places, then they need to know what you can do. And it's a balance, this sort of humility and truth-telling. As an ad man, what...
Well, the internal question, I mean, I actually also faced exactly what you're talking about, British in America, although I'm quite temperamentally flamboyant, so that sort of fitted with New York style, but also that whole notion of managing your career. And I realized that I was actually being passive. I was actually viewed the company as a dad. They're going to look after me. After all, they always had. And I remember once, I had this, if I may say this on a podcast, I had this most amazing appraisal. And then a week later, 4 people at the same level of me got promoted and I didn't. You're going to be a giant in the industry, and why are you treating me like a dwarf? What's going on here? It was really quite painful. And then I realized that I had, they'd asked me, so what would you like? So I really like doing these new products things. Whereas actually, if you want to progress, if you win new business, that's good. But working on new products, that's good. But actually that's not where the big money is. Somebody's got you've got to know that you can handle a big account. So I should be saying, well, I really enjoyed this season, but I think, my next step should be perhaps to work on this kind of a account and so on. So I didn't manage it well. So I didn't express my desires when I had the opportunities to do that, because I didn't think, they'll just look after me. So I think we do need to go before God and say, well, God, what do you want me to do? What is my next stage? I do trust you for it. And it sort of all worked out well in the end. But I think I learned something about companies. You do need to express what you want. Josh, so thanks for being so honest about that. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us you find particularly challenging in this role?
Going back to, you mentioned truth-telling. So as a contingent recruiter, so you're only making money when you fill roles. I had an incident where I was given 2 roles for a business, and I didn't know anything about this business, was basically told how to sell it as exciting, entrepreneurial, really positive, spin it in a really positive light, basically. And as the kind of process unfolded and a few candidates met the client, the client was an absolute weirdo, and actually the person who gave me the role knew that. And what the business was doing was, it was legal, but really frowned upon in the investment industry. So I think they're buying kind of investment trusts or big platforms, breaking them up and selling them off. Something similar to that. It's legal, but no one really likes it. It might be more complex than that. And for me, it then became quite challenging to sell the role, as I was pressured to keep kind of selling it hard and give the positives. But I certainly wouldn't have wanted the job, and again, no one actually took the job, and I think that was right. But just wondering, I guess you're leading a business of how many consultants? 15, 20
Yeah.
consultants? I mean, how are you influencing culture around truth telling? Are there challenges running a big business where you've got probably 15 to 20 almost smaller businesses within that? How do you think about the firm culture around truth telling? Again, lots of your business is probably sold by yourself. I would imagine you are the brand for your business, just your own personality. But how do you keep that coherent across the business?
So I would say I'm not the brand anymore, thank goodness. That the partners, we've got 10 partners, and so they would all be building their own franchise in some way within the firm. I would really struggle with that, Josh, actually, if I was being asked to tell an untruth, and I always have. And I suppose there comes a time when you have to say, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to, I've got a problem with not telling the truth. And a little story on that. I had, again, banking days when I had heard a PA of mine saying, I was busy and she knew I didn't want to be disturbed. And somebody had rung for me, and she said, well, I'm afraid she's out of the office. And I just went to see her afterwards, just really quietly on her own. And I said, Cherry, I'm really grateful to you for covering for me there, because you knew I didn't want to be disturbed, but I wasn't out of the office. And I have a big thing about telling the truth, and so we'll have to find a different way of saying that. So it may be, she's really tied up at the moment. Can somebody else help you? Or she's engaged at the moment. Which tell the truth, but don't tell lies. And I think that thing about somebody may well want to work with that weirdo in that strange company, but you've got to paint it as it is to find the weirdo who probably wants to work with the weirdo, and that's how I've always been, and to be honest, that would be consistent with all my colleagues. I would say they would all feel the same, and there will be some clients we will not work with because they're not, they don't treat people well, and so we'll just sort of say, actually, I'm not sure this is one we're going to be best placed to support you on.
And are there conflicts internally in that, with some of your consultants saying, no, I want to work on this business, and you're saying, actually, no, we're not going to do that?
We'll always talk about it as a group, but we do we'll keep going back to some of our core values. So we've had it really recently where there's a brand that you will have all heard of, and they were doing some stuff that none of us in the business liked. But the reason they'd come to us is because we're really well known for diversity and being able to find particularly women and people of different ethnicities. And they wanted to change the business and bring in more diversity. So they'd come to us because they knew they were bad and they wanted to change. But we just discussed it and sort of thought, do we take this one? Do we not take this one? Are we trying to make them better and therefore it's worth doing? Or is it so bad that, it has to be someone else? And
That's interesting. I think this question, in lots of industries, though, applies. This question of, can you help people find the new language? I suspect that your PA or your executive assistant wasn't thinking, I'm really, really lying here.
No.
But it's instinct, isn't it? I had a friend who's an estate agent. Yes, it's true. And he was a great guy and not a Christian man. And he went to a time management course one day, and he came back, and extraordinary time management course, came back and told his whole team, we're gonna have to tell the truth all the time now. And his partners looked at him and said, we'll never sell another house. And so they sort of called up their partners, and they sat down in the office, for however long it took, and they worked out how they could keep the business moving and tell the truth. Now, that was the key thing, because you've got to keep the business moving. You've been hired to sell a house. So, for example, true story. So you might be showing a couple of two-bedroom flat in Harrow, and you'd be saying, yes, this is good property, which it is, and I would advise an early offer because we've got 3 other couples coming to see it this afternoon. There are not 3 other couples coming to see it this afternoon, but actually that's what they would say. So what did they say? They would say, oh, well, this is a good property, and I must tell you that 2-bedroom apartments or flats in Harrow tend to go quite quickly. True. So if you're interested, I would advise you to make an early offer. So they actually worked through every single instance where they were tempted to lie. And the extraordinary thing in the business, which is not particularly, well, it's marvelous, was that the employee said, this works at home as well. Telling the truth. Telling the truth helps. You've mentioned diversity. So Josh, Joel's actually received her MBE for services to business specifically for diversity and inclusion. As you look at your industry overall, what do you see in terms of diversity and inclusion?
Well, congratulations, first of all.
Well, thank you very much.
I think every recruitment business, probably not every, but most recruitment businesses want to brand themselves as leaders in diversity and inclusion because it is, for the right reasons, the trendy topic at the moment. So every recruiter wants to be the go-to for diversity hiring. Everyone's going to say, we know all the best diverse candidates, which kind of may or may not be true. I mean, I think there's a few interesting things to talk about with D&I hiring, but probably generally recruitment firms are behind in themselves in terms of what they preach. I think it's becoming less so, but they're thinking about it for clients, probably less so about themselves. My observation actually at the junior end, certainly at the research end, that it's pretty diverse. I think our business would probably be more female dominated actually than male at the junior end, but lots of consultants, people winning work, are probably males, partly because they've not taken maternity leave and taken years out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think most firms want to be the leader in it. Not everyone is brilliant about thinking about it for themselves.
Yeah.
Would be my kind of brief observation.
Yeah, this is a very good thing, but we're finding it difficult to action ourselves.
Yes. I mean, the other interesting point just to comment on is that our previous business particularly, we would often get businesses saying we only want to see diverse people, or we only want to see kind of females. And just it is a funny one because you've got lots of males, particularly in accounting and investment banking, who are very qualified for these roles, but diversity-wise, they don't fit the quota, so won't get an interview and probably won't get hired. And completely observationally, probably there are a lot less qualified females in these jobs because most of the females in investment banking will get hired into private equity if they want to. Not all of the qualified males will as well, because females are fitting diversity quotas. So I think it's a really tricky one to advise on, and would be interested to hear your thoughts when you are balancing those two, because everyone wants to hire the best person, everyone wants to hire or have at least some diverse hiring. They don't always stack up when everyone wants to hire the diverse person. And there are limited pools of these people, often, particularly if you're thinking about professional services. I don't know, for one reason or another. But there's some tricky things to navigate, I think.
So there are some red rags to this little ball here. But so I suppose the whole thing about it, poor white men, still more poor white men are being hired to roles than women or people of colour. And what we're trying to do is to address an imbalance and a lack of progression. So if you just look at gender, more than half the graduates are women coming through, and yet less than 10% of the CEOs are women. And what's going on there? So there's some cultural things that we've got to address. And then, in our country, in the last census, 18% of people are non-white. And, that's no way reflected in the boardrooms, which is where we're predominantly operating. And so there's a sort of, well, that's an economic waste of talent. There's a justice thing around, people actually being treated fairly, and actually believing, which I so do, that diversity is better for churches and business and society. And so when I'm talking to my clients, what I'm talking about is introducing diversity as one of the criteria. And so, yes, okay, you might have a man and a woman who are here, or, a black or Asian person and a white person who are roughly similar. But actually, if they're bringing you diversity, then you must hire them, because they're adding something more to your team that you haven't got. And what we're encouraging people to do is actually make an extra hire. So, on some boards, we've been helping them to put an extra board member who's a person of colour on the board, so that they can see the benefits that, having someone from an Asian background or someone from a black background can make it to the commercial success of that business, to the discussion that goes around. And it isn't comfortable. And I think that's why people sort of stand back from it. So, I've talked to chairs who say, oh, since you put all those women on my board, the boards just, they sort of don't come to agreement quickly enough. No, because you're getting different views being expressed. And so, yeah, I do get a little passionate about it. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to apologise for that at all. I mean, for lots of small organisations, this is a really big challenge, isn't it? Because, I remember once at LICC, you've got 20 people. Yeah. There's one moment when actually we look quite racially diverse. One person leaves and suddenly we're not racially diverse, or, and it's quite difficult. What companies is there something that you...
Well, Warren Partners is 30 people.
Yeah.
So, it's exactly the same. And we've been working really hard to make sure we fit at least 50-50. Well, you can't be at least 50-50, can you? But we're gender balanced. And we've got that 18% of ethnically diverse. And if we have exactly... So I have to say, we then go purposefully out to recruit somebody. But what we do is we try to think, what roles are there more women in, and what roles are you more likely to find ethnically diverse talent in? So you tend to find quite a lot of women in HR, in marketing, in legal. So those roles could be, look first for a woman, and do the same with ethnicity.
And I suppose that's an ad for executive search companies, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Because you put an ad in the paper, you get who you get. But if you really, really want... You really want a woman, or you really want a black person or an Asian person, or somebody with some form of disability.
Yeah, exactly.
Use executive search.
Yeah.
Other firms are available.
Yeah.
John, Josh, John. You're the only Christian in your firm, I think you might have told me, or the only one you know?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
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 How does that feel?
Tough.
The culture... Certainly in my generation is pretty much anything goes. So it goes both ways. And even if you're a Christian, fine.
Yeah.
And actually the culture amongst, I think generally amongst young people in work, I might be wrong, this is just for the businesses I've worked with, there's a lot less drinking. So drinking's I think historically was really hard, particularly in recruitment firms or professional services, because that's how you get ahead, is go drinking with the senior people, make them like you, and then you'll move on. And actually, even with clients, even my one of the consultants I worked with yesterday encouraged us as the research team, you should basically get drunk with your candidates more, because it builds rapport. And I think he's probably absolutely right, it does. But that's not something that I'm going to do. And am I going to be behind in my career because of that? Maybe. So I think probably the trickiest one is probably around drinking.
Right.
But that has changed a little bit internally. Most people now want to go off and do their yoga in the evenings. And
Yeah. Yeah.
genuinely.
Yeah. No, very good.
So, but it is, yeah.
So, without putting too fine a point on it, long haul Christian in a tough business, how have you stayed faithful?
I think there are some disciplines probably. So there are daily disciplines around quiet times and what have you. There's weekly ones around church and home groups, and we also do annual. We go on walking. We Camino, big Camino walkers, and that's become quite a thin place for me.
Right.
Place when I can feel close to God. And I think in the past it's been, your spring harvests, your new wines, whatever it has. But Camino's become very special retreat for me. So yes, I suppose it's having some of those disciplines in there. And then I have a husband who walks the journey with me. I've got wonderful Christian friends. And all of the LICC material, of course.
Of course, indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
Josh, what advice would you give somebody starting out in work today?
My first bit of advice in recruitment, it would be to work hard and honour your boss and honour God in your work. Yeah, and I think really be as I think in recruitment specifically or more broadly.
Whichever you prefer. That's not helpful right now, is it?
Well, I think in recruitment, if you're going to be successful and do it long term, you really need to quite quickly kind of figure out with God almost how you're going to do it, and figure out for yourself how you're going to do it, because it's a hard place to be. There's a lot of money flying around, and at the back of your mind is always, if I stick at this, I could make it big time. And so quickly reconciling that with your faith and with God, and kind of walking the challenges with Him each day. I think what I'm trying to say is make sure you are pursuing God each day and putting Him first. And even if it doesn't, that can be hard in your heart, because again, being motivated and actually earning a lot of money is quite attractive to a young male like myself.
Yeah.
Is what do I want my life to be about? I want to honour God in my career. I want to put Him first. If the money comes, then brilliant, I'll be generous with it. If not, I'm happy as is. So spending time with God each day and listening to Him, speaking to Him.
Brilliant, thank you. Joel, any particular Bible verses or characters that are significant to you as you've walked this walk?
Characters, probably Daniel, Esther, that some of those Old Testament people who were thrust into courts of the king, and were standing firm for God.
Yeah.
I remember you and I having a coffee at Costa a few years ago.
We do go to the most splendid places, don't we?
Do. And you said to me, so this isn't a Bible verse,
right.
Mark Greene verse.
It's almost as authoritative.
He said, Joelle, you reach the parts that other Christians don't reach.
Oh, a stolen line from Heineken.
But, I suppose that's Josh, what I'd be saying to you is, you're reaching the parts that your vicar can't go to, your parents can't go to. He's put you there. And, that whole thing about it might be a dark industry, but the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness won't overcome it.
Amen. How about you, Josh? Any particular people or any particular verses, or is it just the whole Bible and everybody in it?
No, well, I mentioned to you previously, partly because it was written in all of my cards when I got baptized, was the verse in Joshua. It just says, Joshua, be strong and courageous.
Yeah.
I think part of that is living differently, be courageous where you are, just for this period, however long that is. God's got me in this business, and I live differently for him. If he calls you out of it, be courageous in doing that. God will give me the strength that I need to honour him each day if I kind of choose to lean into that. So yeah, I really like that. Be strong and courageous.
Yeah, it's a brilliant verse, actually. Well, there's 3 of them which says, be strong and courageous. And
Yeah.
verse 7 says, be strong and very courageous. And in the English, there's a full stop. I don't know if you know the English, there's a full stop. But in the Hebrew, there isn't a full stop. And what follows it is, be careful to do all the law that my servant Moses has given you. And what it's actually saying in the Hebrew is, be strong and very courageous to do all the law, to be careful to do all the law. And I think I found that so helpful, because actually it takes courage. It's not just strong and courageous to take on the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and so on. It's being strong and courageous to be careful to to obey God's law. And I think in some of the context that you describe, that's actually quite difficult. So you need it just for that, day by day. And never mind the big battles, if you like. Yeah.
I've also found that letting people know that I'm a Christian means that they hold me accountable. So, you know, if you sort of put it out there, you're a Christian, well, you can't then go and get drunk, can you? Because, you know, that's going to discredit the gospel. And they would be the first to say if you told a porky pie. So, yeah, put it out there.
Put it out there. Well, thank you very much, both of you, indeed. In a moment, I'm going to give you some splendid gifts. But before that, in order to earn your way to these gifts, I'm going to do a quiz, a little 9-question quiz.
Oh, heck.
Yes, all right. Well, who wants to go first? Doesn't matter, I'm going to choose you. So here you go. Josh, sweet or sour?
Oh, sour.
Salmon or steak?
Steak.
Gospel of Mark or Gospel of John?
I wish I knew them well enough to differentiate between them both.
Well, choose one for the sake of Mark. Very good. Man of action. Yeah. Deborah or Ruth?
Ruth.
Rugby union or football?
Football.
Films or novels?
Films.
Jazz or rock?
Jazz.
One book you've really enjoyed this year, doesn't have to be a Christian book.
June.
June.
Yeah.
Is that by?
I don't know. It's the film.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's the book on the film.
Oh, Dune. Sorry, I thought you said June.
No, Dune.
Oh, yeah, it's my ears.
I don't know.
Ears. And one thing you really like about Jesus?
That he likes me.
Ah, very good. Likes me too.
Jesus loves me.
Yeah, if only we really, really, really could get that in there. So, Joëlle, sweet or sour?
Sweet.
Salmon or steak?
Salmon.
Gosh, you're really not incompatible for lunch, are you? Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Ruth?
Mark.
Sorry, John?
Yeah,
Mark?
Mark.
Deborah or Ruth? Rugby union or football?
Football, probably.
Films or novels?
Novels.
Jazz or rock?
Jazz.
One book you've really enjoyed this year?
I read on Kindle and can't remember the titles of most books, apart from I did get Born Free by Catherine Hill, which I've really enjoyed.
Right, yeah. One thing you really like about Jesus?
He loves me.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, your rewards are coming your way. Because it's the Thank God It's Monday, you get the latest edition of Thank God It's Monday.
Thank you.
The 5th edition, clean and pristine, and I haven't written in it, so it's still moderately valuable. And you're going to get a box of these.
Wow. Sweet.
Sweet chocolate, because it's LICC. You always get chocolate LICC.
Okay.
And these little red orbs of sweetness are there to remind us, like the red dots in the LICC logo, that it is a sweet thing to be called to represent Jesus in his world. So to stop you open the box right now, there's one for you and one for you.
Thank you.
Thank you again very much indeed for your honesty, clarity, and joy in God. Thank you for the wisdom that you've given us today. If you're interested in following up more about work, then there is always the LICC website to scuttle along to, where there's a whole range of films, links, books, resources, prayer journeys, and so on. So that's www.licc.org.uk. And wherever you are this day, remember that you are loved. You are liked by the King of the universe, the one who sent his Son for you. And that because of his great fatherly love, he will, I pray, enable you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. May he give you the strength and the courage, the boldness to be careful, to follow him, your gracious Saviour, in all you do this day and in the coming week. Thanks for listening. Shalom, shalom.